Regeneration after having given it a lot of thought. I would like to argue that I think this issue runs deeper than financial independence and skills. I would like to argue that what we are facing here is an issue of psychological conditioning. And please allow me to unpack it. You see, I think the critical issue central to this theme is how we choose to raise our girls and the conversations we choose to have with them with a view of influencing and shaping them towards a particular direction. The biggest problem, in my view, are the barriers and the red tapes that are established for us as young girls in terms of who we can become and what we can achieve. You see, if you are going to have self-limiting messages reinforced in you throughout your whole life, it unfortunately ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because remember, all of us are products of our own environment. Now, at this point, let me request you to park that thought. I'm going to come back to it. I want to illustrate the point that I'm making by telling you a fable about an eagle that thought he was a chicken. You see, when this eagle was very small, he fell from the safety of his nest and he was found by a chicken farmer. The chicken farmer brought him to the farm and raised him as a chicken with other chickens in a chicken coop. And the eagle grew up doing what chickens do, living like a chicken and believing he was a chicken. Since the chickens can only fly for a short distance, the eagle also only learned to fly for a short distance. He thought that was what he was supposed to do, so that was all he could do, and as a consequence, that was all he was able to do. And one day, this eagle saw a bird flying high above him. He was very impressed. And he asked the question from the other hands. He said, "Who is that?" And the other hands around him answered him by saying, "That's the eagle. He's the king of the birds. He belongs to the sky, but we as chickens belong to the earth. We are just chickens." So the eagle lived and died as a chicken, for that is what he thought he was. You know, a mind is a very powerful instrument. You see, if you are going to be given messages your entire life that you need to know your place, you know that as a woman you can't do this, as a woman you can't do that, as a woman you can't be too successful because you will scare off men, as a woman you can't be too vocal because it is not ladylike. If you are told limiting stereotypes such as men are born to take charge, and as women, we are born to take care. You see, through these messages, you cause individuals to conform to the behaviors associated with such stereotypes. And unfortunately, this is not helping. You cannot strip a person's power through such messages for the rest of their lives and be surprised when they struggle with being assertive and with being independent. Just like the eagle. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about economic empowerment for women. And I'm saying that we need to change the narrative and instill different messages to our young girls so that when they grow up, they can be something different. They need to grow up understanding that they don't need to tolerate abuse and they don't need to withstand abuse. You know, when you read the book called Outlier by Malcolm Gladwell, you get to understand that success is not a random act. Success arises out of a predictable and powerful set of circumstances and opportunities. So if you are born and brought up in a situation and environment that limits your understanding of your potential, an environment that does very little to affirm you and spur you on, you end up believing and accepting the glass ceiling that is imposed on you by the environment. Let's agree that if some of us were born in a just, non-patriarchal and gender-equal world and environment, many of us, our mothers included, could have been more successful. Because you see, even the most gifted of us sometimes struggle to escape the limitations of our environment. Ladies, I'm talking about economic empowerment for women and how we can defeat it. You know, as women, we have an immense, inconceivable, and extraordinary power to keep on moving in spite of our adversities. Someone once said that women become successful in spite of their adversities, not despite their adversities. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're hearing me. There is a difference. Women become successful in spite of their adversities, not despite their adversities. You know, I once listened to an interview of Serena Williams, the tennis player. I'm sure we all know who she is. The interview was when she was at the Wimbledon finals in July 2018, which was a mere 10 months after giving birth. And the journalist was asking her how she made it to the finals, because she had been out of action for quite some time, and she comes back and she performs brilliantly and makes her way to the finals when no one thought she would. I found her response to be very interesting. She said, you know, someone like me never gets a break. And I never have it easy because everyone who plays against me brings out their A game. It therefore means that when I play, my A game is not good enough. I have to bring more than my A game. I literally have to walk on water. She said, I play everyone at their absolute best, but unfortunately, this has backfired on everyone because it has made me brilliant at my game. That's why I'm the best. And ladies, for me, this resonated because I thought, surely this is the silver lining for us as women. We never have it easy, and we normally have to work twice as hard just to get the same recognition. We are constantly swimming against the tide. But that is precisely what makes us very resilient as women. We are never cut any slack, and we never get a day off. My mother used to say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I must say that amidst all these challenges, I really remain hopeful. I remain hopeful because of what I see and what I observe in a lot of these young people, my 13-year-old daughter, by the way, included. They are very assertive, they are very confident, they are not shy to speak their minds. They understand that the limits you will have are those that are self-imposed, and they appreciate that your future will only be limited by the choices that you make. You see, I'm getting some background feedback. Can I continue, or is someone trying to say something? Okay, I'll continue. Thank you very much, facilitator. You see, these young women understand that the limits you will have are those that are self-imposed. And they appreciate that your future will only be limited by the choices that you make. They have the blessing of having been born in a particular time in this country and in this world. Because remember, as I said earlier, irrespective of how brilliant and gifted you are, even the most gifted of us sometimes struggle to escape the limitations of our environment. Let me close on this note. You see, the only way women will understand that they are eagles, not chickens, and be able to withstand the abuse and have the power to walk away is when
Your microphone is off. Your microphone is off.
Yeah, warning.
You're on mute. Somebody needs to tell her she's on mute.
Looks like somebody muted him. Hey. I think someone has muted her.
Sorry, Ms. Mavuso, can you please unmute yourself?
I'm sorry. Okay, I see now. I think because of the background noise, the host muted everyone and myself included. I'm not sure.
I apologize.
That's fine. I'm not sure where you lost me, but let me try and go back a few steps. I was talking about the fact that I'm hopeful about these young women of today because of their assertiveness. And they obviously have the gift of being born in a particular time in this country where they have more opportunities than what some of us would have had. And let me close on this note. You see, the only way women will understand that they are eagles and not chickens and be able to withstand the abuse and have the power to walk away from the abuse is when we as society are deliberate about removing the barriers we as society have placed on them. When we give them the message that they are enough, when we give them the message that their gender is not in any way a limitation, when we tell them that it is not a man's world, that they don't have to play second fiddle, that they don't have to play small and shrink themselves so that other people won't feel insecure around them. Because let's agree that as women, we are great at making ourselves small in order to make someone else feel better. We need to groom self-assured young women who will be confident to challenge the status quo and bring about the much needed change. As I close, ladies, let me say, you know, if we fail to get today's theme of having women as pillars of the society, if women, then we are going to have a society of poor kids. I'm going to say that again. If we fail to achieve today's theme of having women as pillars of the society, we are going to have a society of poor kids, because poor women, women that are not empowered, poor women give birth to poor kids. And let's be clear what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about material poverty. I'm talking about poverty of thinking. I'm talking about poverty of initiative. I'm talking about poverty of independence, poverty of assertiveness, poverty of objectivity, poverty of knowledge, poverty of wisdom, poverty of common sense. Because you see, as women, we are the primary caregivers and we are the pillars of society. The facilitator, in making her introductory remarks, says, if we as women are broken, then the society will be broken. Because as women, we raise, we nurture, we groom, we conscientize. So if we are poor as women, and if we are disempowered, then unfortunately we are going to groom and raise and rear poor kids. Madam Facilitator, please allow me to pause here and let me take questions or comments, or maybe let me allow other speakers to come in. I'm not sure which comes next, but let me thank MRM, let me thank you, Father Mkatwa, for giving me an opportunity to come and have these very critical and important conversations, because I feel that as women, we don't have these conversations enough. We sit in our own little corners and we think that this is our struggle and our struggle alone. So in having these conversations, we realize that, you know what, we can be empowered and we can be so much more than what this society tells us that we can be. So I think I'm very encouraged about this conversation, and I'm hoping that this is not a conversation that we should only have in August. This is a conversation that we should be having each and every single day, precisely because of the importance that we as women play in society. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Madam Facilitator.
Thank you very much. Questions will be at 20 minutes past 3 for about 30 minutes. So we'll have the next speaker, Dr. Leslie Ann Foster. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. It's very good to be with you. I'm Leslie Ann Foster. I'm from Massimiliano Women's Rights International. And I'm going to be speaking
Madam
specifically.
Facilitator, apologies, Dr. Foster. Monwabisi is not on mute, and therefore his voice is projecting, and that is why there is the background noise that you are hearing. Monwabisi, if you can please put yourself on mute. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam.
Can I also ask the host to enable my screen sharing, please, because I have a PowerPoint presentation. Can you
Sorry,
please?
I think you will have to enable it from your side. Is there no option?
No,
that
it says host disabled. I have tried from my side. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, one second. Let me try on my side.
At the bottom, it says share screen. You have to open that up for me, please. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is the issue of gender-based violence and femicide, which is one of the major pandemics that we are facing in our country at the moment. And we had the collision of two pandemics, which was COVID and the issue of gender-based violence coming together over this last period of time. My organization is Massimiliano Women's Rights International. We've been going for the last 24 years, and this is our particular area of work. Our expertise is in this area of work. Are you able to see my slides as yet?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. So I wanted to talk first about the crisis in South Africa. I think everybody is overwhelmed by the news of young women who are being raped and particularly murdered. You know, that this is growing at an exponential level and becomes a really big problem for us as a country. So intimate partner violence in South Africa is estimated to be around 37.7% of women in Gauteng, and probably very similar in other areas, have experienced physical violence, and 46.2% economic and emotional abuse. Overall, between 19% and 33% of women have ever experienced physical partner violence, but in some population subgroups, there may be as high as 1 in 2 women. Perpetration of violence by men is more commonly reported, and population-based studies have reported this amongst 40 to 50% of men. So research was done by the Medical Research Council asking men if they'd ever been violent, and between 40 and 50% of them in the study said they had. More than half of the women murdered, 56%, were killed by their intimate partners. And this is more than double of the rate in the US, and certainly on par with countries like, we would have to compare ourselves to countries like South America, where they also have very high femicide rates. South Africa's female murders, 5 times the global average. Rapes are in excess of 60,000 a year. Children, 23,488 reported. So we see that sexual violence and femicide is extremely high in our country.
Dr. Foster, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You are able to share your screen now.
Okay, I'm looking. Just hold on a minute. I shall look. There we go. Share screen. Good.
And just one request. Once you finish your presentation, can you please make me a host again?
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So here I have a picture of an iceberg where what you see on top and what you see at the bottom is vastly different. And this is very much a depiction of violence against women in our country. The reported rapes are said to be only 10%. 90% of it is not reported. And that's, of course, beneath the surface. And this is what women's experiences are really like. This is the truth about women's experiences. And state and society respond superficially to this. At the moment we have, as previous speakers also said, we have a problem. And both the state responses and societal responses are superficial. This leads to impunity and a lack of accountability and allows the violence to continue. Just one moment. So some of the things, you know, when we talk about an empowerment agenda, the previous speaker has mentioned the issue of substantive equality. Now, we have a real problem where we have a very unequal society. Inequality is different for women to what it is for men. The inequality for women is about their low status within society, which we've heard about. It is the fact that society has not as yet valued women's lives and valued their contribution to the society. So when we talk about women's empowerment, we have to look at the issue of ending discrimination, looking at state accountability to end impunity. Impunity is when nothing is done when crimes against women happen. We have semi-truths that happen. We have a silencing justification. And all of this agenda needs to change to provide the whole truth about what's happening in women's lives. We still do not have a clear picture of how serious the violence is. We only become incensed when we hear murder or rapes and things like that, but we don't know. And domestic violence, the actual battery, the financial abuse, the psychological abuse, that affects far more women in our country than we are willing to admit at this time. And I think that the issue of intimate partner violence and domestic violence is something that there's just not enough is done about that. So goals and preventative work should also be done. And we should look at masculinities. They're asking whether we should look at that instead of the empowerment of girls. But the model Masimanyane uses, which is a feminist model, looks at building women's agency. We do not believe that we must rely on the goodwill of men, but that we have to have women and build them up to have an equal standing with men. That's the real issue that our society is grappling with. How to avoid rape, shame, and blame is what we do with young women. We make it about them, that it's their problem and they should be the ones that should be dressing differently, not going to certain places, being in the home after dark and so forth. So that, I think, is a very problematic approach. And rape can never be the victim's fault, never. The opinion pool from Amnesty, so yeah, there's something we're talking about, Amnesty International. So what we're doing in South Africa, we've been developing a new national strategic plan. Now, this national strategic plan is part of a long process, a political process that has taken place since 2018. We had the total shutdown campaign where young women again were able to rise up and protest against the femicides that were taking place. I apologize for the phone in the background. And what they did was they forced the president to make a commitment to address gender-based violence, to declare it a national emergency. Then we had the Declaration on Violence Against Women that was signed by the president in March. So that was an important milestone. Then we had the Presidential Committee that started to look at these the issue of gender-based violence and what we need to do. So a presidential committee was put together and they worked on a national strategic plan. So the interesting thing about the national strategic plan is that we've tried different things in the country. We've looked at victim empowerment, which is the main government program, and that has had some impact. But we've also then looked at prevention, and we've had awareness campaigns. We've done a lot of work around getting the communities to know what's actually happening. And in doing that, we've realized that it wasn't enough. So there was also a movement to involve men in gender-based violence and to look at how they can contribute to that. That didn't yield any results either. We didn't see a reduction coming into this particular area of work. So the National Strategic Plan does something different. It brought together all sectors of society. It brought together the state, it brought together business, it brought together religious leaders, it brought together traditional leaders and all other civil society organizations. And they then sat down and said, what do we actually need to do? And what we recognized is that we needed a multi-sectoral approach and a partnership of all sectors of society to work together to address violence against women. So the National Strategic Plan has now been developed and it has 6 pillars. The first pillar is accountability, coordination, and leadership. Most critical part of the work. The second pillar is prevention and rebuilding social cohesion in our society. And this is very much what the moral regeneration movement does. The third is justice, laws and policy, and the safety and protection. How do we ensure the safety and protection of people within our society? The fourth pillar is the response and care. So what is it that survivors or victim survivors require if they've experienced violence? And how do we put that into place? The fifth is economic empowerment. Quite a bit has been said about that already. And then the sixth pillar is research, information, and research and information management. So I think we should go into this and look at the issue of accountability and prevention. What we expect to do here is that we want to harness all to respond to the crisis. So we spoke about having an all of society approach, everybody in society being involved. The response has to also address the structural drivers of gender-based violence. So we haven't really looked at that with depth and with a full analysis to look at how do we actually identify the drivers and how do we address them. Now, some of those drivers are economic drivers. Some of them are social drivers, such as the inequality, patriarchy, the low status of women in society. The approach also is to stop violence before it begins. We said it's not enough. Currently, our programs look at the end when women are already victims and saying, we have a victim empowerment program. We're saying, how do we stop women from becoming victims altogether? We have insisted that some of the values include providing victim-centered, survivor-focused, accessible quality services. We have to enhance strategic, institutional, and resourcing coherence, and then elevate accountability at all levels. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about accountability and leadership. For the first time in the country, we have very strong political commitment to addressing gender-based violence. Very strong commitment from the president. But we need bold leadership and strengthened accountability across government and society. It's not enough that it's vested in the president's office. It has to filter through all of the tiers of government and also through society. Must be strategic, it must have clear messaging, adequate technical and financial resources. Also strengthened multi-sectoral coordination. We need to be working together much more coherently and cohesively than we've ever done in the past. So we need that collaboration across different tiers and sections of society and government based on relationships of trust that give effect to the pillars. Pillar 2 is prevention and rebuilding social cohesion. Now, what we've done in the past in prevention is awareness raising. And we've said we need to dig deeper than that. We need to go into the structural drivers and address those as preventative mechanisms. So we need strengthened delivery capacity in South Africa to roll out evidence-based prevention programs, not just picketing or standing up or marching or candlelight, because those are or wearing orange or wearing black or whatever. That has limited impact in terms of really stopping and preventing the violence. We've got to dig deeper than that. We need to change behavior and social norms within all groups, I believe. It says key groups here, but it's not just key groups, it's all groups. Because social norms and behavior is the relationships between men and women. And women themselves are born into a patriarchal system, so they adapt some of those, ways of being, and we have to change that. We've got to shift away from toxic masculinities. Now, we do have a crisis of masculinity in the country. Obviously, not all men buy into this toxic masculinity, but I think we need to really investigate that. And my work in the country has shown that the work with men doesn't deal with the issue of men. It's always about how to address women. And women should be doing their own work, because it's never about women's agency, it's about protection. We call it the protectionist approach, and the protectionist approach still denies women's agency. So we've got to turn that around and look at how do we address toxic masculinities and build women's and develop women's agency so that it comes together on an equal basis. There's an issue that we felt very strongly about, and that is violence against children. Often children are left out of the equation when violence occurs. Every day we read about, this morning I was reading about a woman who had her husband assassinated, and a child, 8-year-old, watched from under the table. She hid under the table, and she watched all of that. Now, all of that trauma is going to live with that child for the rest of her life. And often we don't have the resources to address it. And the children then, their whole quality of life is compromised, and they carry that into adulthood, into relationships. We need to address and have the proper kind of support for children. Then increased cross-fertilization and integration of prevention interventions on violence, on the LGBTQI+ persons, and we've got to look at how all of these different communities are supported through this plan. Strengthen programming that addresses the restoration of human dignity, builds caring communities, and responds to historic and collective trauma. We need public spaces that are made safe and violence-free for all, particularly women and children. And we need healing in our society. Everybody needs healing, and COVID has made that more evident than ever before. The third pillar is justice, safety and protection, and this refers to the laws and policies. I'm very happy to say that we have quite a strong legislation, but there are 3 draft bills down on the table now that are working at strengthening the criminal justice system in respect of gender-based violence. And some of that is going to have registers of rapists that are made publicly known, so that people can know that they're not safe in particular people, the presence of particular people and so forth. So some of that legislation is going to help us a lot. Then we've got response care and healing. This is also something where a lot of the survivors of gender-based violence haven't got access to support, haven't got access to healing. The fact that we know that only about 10% of cases are reported means that 90% of the people that are suffering from violence are walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder, mental anxiety, mental health issues, and health issues. We forget that the stress of all of the violence which is perpetrated on women results in hypertension, in diabetes, in cholesterol, in obesity, in all kinds of problems. And therefore, we have to really sharpen the response and care element of it. One of the positives of this is that we have the Thuthuzela care centers, and the Thuthuzela care centers are really providing a holistic service, a one-stop shop service to survivors, and where they operate well, they are doing, you know, really great work. Another positive is the victim empowerment program, which is in all police stations. These provide support to survivors, which has really been very exciting to see how that has helped. We've got to stop secondary victimization. We've got to help victims to feel supported, and we have to have strengthened community and institutional responses to gender-based violence. I'm admitting people as we talk here and as they come into the room. Go to the next one. Sorry. Pillar 5 is economic power. I'm not going to speak about this because I think Busisiwe spoke about it quite extensively. But what we do know is that women that are economically dependent are more vulnerable to violence. But I want to assure you, as a woman that has provided services to more than 400,000 people over the last 24 years, women that are economically empowered are just as vulnerable. Just as vulnerable. Believe you me, they can have economic power, but it doesn't, so it's not a guarantee. It does help in many instances because women then have agency and they have independence, does help, but it's not, doesn't mean that they are exempt from it. So that pillar, yeah, you have had quite a bit of input. Then we've got pillar 6, which is research and information management. Now, one of the big problems we have in the country is that we have never been able to estimate the size of the problem in real terms. A lot of the information comes from smaller research projects, but we've never had a countrywide research on gender-based violence. I do know that there is one in the pipeline, which will be really exciting to see, and that it may take off either in the course of this year or early next year. I think COVID put a stop to it, that it was going to be rolled out earlier, but that is still to come. So those are the 6 pillars that we believe. Now, what is important about the pillars is that it's not looking at one aspect of gender-based violence and how to address that one aspect. It's looking across our society from the economic to the social and saying, what are the different elements that we need to bring together? It's exciting for me because it brings different strands together. It gives us a new opportunity of how we can actually address gender-based violence and femicide in a holistic way. It brings together, I don't know if I can mute everybody because the noise coming from, there are a few people with their microphones on and it's disturbing. Anyway, so what I was saying is that because it's bringing all these different strands together, because there are 6 pillars, because it includes all of society, we have a much better chance to make this actually work better for us. So you see here we have the individual, the community, the society, we have included children, relationships, and the family. This is a very important way of, a different way of approaching gender-based violence, and one that holds greater potential for seeing a reduction. Another thing that I think is I will just mention is that what is happening now going forward is that a National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is being established. It will be the custodian of the National Strategic Plan, and it will play the role of strategic oversight for the realization of the national outcomes outlined in the plan. The presidency is to ensure that government allocates adequate resources. As you may have heard last year, 1.6 billion rand was set aside for work on gender-based violence. What we do know, what we could only track was that 90 million of it went to civil society organizations. The rest of it was invested in government departments for them to strengthen their responses on gender-based violence. But it was important to see that there was actually a specific attempt made to set aside money, sufficient money to carry forward some of this work, and that's exciting for us. It shows that there was the political will was actually being resourced. Then one of the important things about this is that we have asked our Parliament to ensure that the structure is governed by a statutory framework, so that it's not just an ad hoc committee, but actually, you know, is grounded into the political space within our state structures. And then a relationship with the wider national gender machinery is necessary, so that can also help to support this, and the new structure will be inclusive. What is exciting about the structure is that the Total Shutdown campaign demanded that whatever processes moving forward take place, 51% of the members must come from civil society. The reason for that was that it was said that when there's a change of guard within the state, then everything changes and the institutions become destabilized. Whereas if you have 51% civil society, then you can keep the stability. And that was the same with the presidential committee. So lastly, in terms of driving the National Strategic Plan, there'll be a secretariat which is already up and running. It is responsible for the technical support. Government departments will align their outputs with the respective 5-year strategic plan. So that's going to be exciting. That's going to be different, because government departments now have to align with the National Strategic Plan. So they don't have to, you know, come up with any other new ideas. It's in the National Strategic Plan. They pick up the ones that are best suited to them, and they run with that. The presidency, led by the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, will facilitate institutional coherence across government, working with and through key strategic government departments and civil society networks and organizations, building national, provincial, and local accountability for an urgent, comprehensive, and all-inclusive response to GBV. And then development of partners will align the investment to GBV in South Africa with the wider national priorities articulated in the NSP. It's interesting that the business community has also come out very strongly in support of the National Strategic Plan. We had SAPCOA, which is a South African business coalition, was part of the discussions at while we were busy with the NSP. So there's a lot of support for it from the private sector. And empowerment has to result in the complete well-being of women, showing their strength, resilience, and power. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the next speaker, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Program Director, and I would like to greet everybody, all the participants and all the speakers, and also just to say thank you very much for this opportunity for me to come and share a few thoughts around the topic that I've been given, which is psychological impact of gender-based violence. And I think you will see as I go through my talk that there are a lot of synergies between some of the issues that I will raise together with what Dr. Leslie Ann has already talked to us about. And for me, this really shows the importance of some of the issues that we are confronting and are engaging with. Allow me to start by acknowledging and honoring the many women who have lost their lives in the hands of men. I would like to single out a few of them. I would like to single out Uyinene Mkhwetyana, a UCT student who was brutally killed by a post office worker in this very month, August in 2019. And again, Leandra Yachels, who was a young boxing champion, a young woman as well, who lost her life in the hands of her boyfriend. And again, recently now in 2020, again, a young student, a first-year student at Wits, Asitambile Zozo, was also brutally killed by a man, also in this month of August. These are but some of the many women who have lost their lives in violent ways here in South Africa as a result of gender violence. That the brutal murders of the young women I have just mentioned happened during the Women's Month is testimony to the journey that still lies ahead for all of us. In this month, we are to take a moment to reflect and remember the sacrifices and bravery of the 1956 women who challenged the apartheid government. Their struggle was against an oppressive system that penetrated their very intimate. Okay. The struggles faced by women then are intertwined with struggles faced by women today. And for me, this shows us the importance of history. That for us to understand
Sorry to disturb, Prof. May we please ask Mr. Gregory to mute his mic? We are getting feedback from his mic. And Mama Nkosi, could we also ask you to mute your mic? And can we ask that we keep on constantly checking that our mics are on mute, because we don't have a lot of time. Because if we don't mute our mics, we disturb the speaker, then she has to repeat again and so on. So if we could constantly check if our mics are on mute so that we don't disturb the speaker. Sorry, Prof. We can continue.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you very much. As I was saying, that the struggles faced by women today are intertwined with the struggles that were faced by women in the past. And so the psychological impact of the violence suffered by women cuts deep from one generation to the next. It is therefore very important for us to pay attention to the psychological implications of gender-based violence on people's everyday existence. For example, now as we face COVID-19, gender-based violence has become hyper-visible, where attention has been paid to numbers of women who report violations they experience in the hands of their intimate partners. Gender-based violence affects women at multiple levels. It affects women at the physical level, at the mental level, and at the behavioral level as well. It affects their health, as Dr. Leslie Ann has indicated to us. And the consequences of these persist long after the violence has stopped. So the many women that we find in our society are carrying many psychological wounds with them as a result of the violence that they've experienced in their lives. Most of the women in South Africa are not safe in intimate spaces such as their homes, and they are also not safe in the public spaces as well, such as the post office, such as the taxi ranks. So it becomes very difficult for women to navigate the spaces within which they live. We live in a society where there seems to be a sense of entitlement, where men feel entitled to women's bodies, to their very existence, and this creates a challenge when it comes to women having to live their lives as free citizens within a democratic country. This speaks to the ways in which many of our men are socialized, but also to the structural and patriarchal systems within which we exist. Women's lives continue to be at the periphery, to be marginalized, where to be a woman is to be constantly surveilled and most often at the mercy of men as well. And all of these have deep psychological implications to how women navigate life and occupy space as well. So in this talk, I consider gender-based violence as a curious, relentless, and brutally consistent dynamic of human existence. We see headlines from the media here in South Africa and further afield in countries such as the UK, in India, in the United States, in Mexico, and in Russia, amongst other countries, announcing that gender-based violence is on the rise in COVID. This topic of gender-based violence in the times of COVID has erupted as if by surprise across the globe, exposing just under the covers of COVID how this has always been an issue, but it has become hyper-visibilized during the COVID era because of the lockdown that have been imposed on people. So critically, I want to challenge us to trouble this idea of shock. You know, it's shocking, the shocking numbers, the shocking violations, as if as a country we have not been experiencing this for a very long time. And I would like us to question this unprecedented crisis and ask, for whom is this crisis new? Because for many women, gender-based violence is something that many of them have to encounter and have to live with on a daily basis. So with this question in mind, I would like to zoom in on some of the psychological implications of gender-based violence on the lives of women. And the first one I would like to focus on is the idea of shame and embarrassment. Many abused women feel a sense of shame as a result of the violence and abuse that they experience in the hands of men, many of whom being their intimate partners. These partners are people they were hoping to be loved and cared for by. Women become silenced, often involuntarily due to the stigma also linked to intimate partner violence. Much of the violence happens within the home, as we know. It's usually someone that you know, someone that you're close with. It happens within that intimate space. And the home, as we know, is a place where women should be feeling safe. But for most of them, this is the very space where they become violated. The home and intimate kin relations are a side of social life where care, violence, and resistance are privatized. What happens in the home must stay in the home. But what are the implications of that for people? Most of the time, things remain in the home because they're coated in shame. What are people going to say? What are people going to think about my relationship? So this violation then becomes coated in shame, leading to silences where women do not express the violations that they're experiencing. Inside our homes, the needs and dependencies flow. We depend on one another. Our needs are supposed to be met within our homes. So the needs and dependencies flow. Shame and silence also grow and develop within these spaces. And many women live in homes riddled with poverty, affected by the external structural challenges. You know, the rates of unemployment also filter into their homes and also contribute to some of the challenges that women face in the homes. Under very different pressures and with very different resources, in all homes, in good times and more likely in bad times, women largely are the ones who pick up the ashes rod of structural violence, even as they enflesh the lashes of intimate violence itself. And across the globe, the majority of women who suffer these violations are Black women, even though we know that violence against women does not go according to color, according to economic status. But we will find that many of the Black women are the ones who carry this burden. They pick up after all of us most of the time. You just need to look around to see who the domestic workers are. And so linking to the challenges that women are confronted with. And then the second issue I'd like to focus on is how gender-based violence affects women and lead to low self-esteem and experiences of trauma. Gender-based violence lead to women having low self-esteem, questioning themselves, and leading them to experiencing trauma as a result of the violence that they experience. They develop self-doubt, and some also stop believing in themselves. This may lead to them withdrawing from everyday activities and being disinterested in what happens around them. And thirdly, women may develop a sense of helplessness, right? They may end up not knowing what to do as the violence appears to be an intricate part of their lives. This is part of my life. This is what happens to me every day or every week. And I try to reach out, maybe to go and report to the police, but nothing gets done. I report to my extended family, nothing gets done. So what do I do? Right? So most of the women feel helpless when they are failed by the justice system. They feel helpless when their family continue to say, no, let's deal with this in-house, and women continue to be violated. So it may lead to them feeling helpless. And this sense of helplessness may lead to women not even talking about the violations that they're experiencing. This is something that one of the scholars called Farid, in his study on gender-based violence, has called mundanity, something that is tiresome, something that you see as the mundane, the everyday part of my life. I get beaten up every week. It's part of my life. So it becomes the mundane. And therefore, this sense of helplessness is affecting women very negatively in their lives. It leads to someone feeling out of control and helpless. In such cases, women may not see the point or need to even report or act on the violation perpetrated against them. And fourthly, gender-based violence may lead to depression and suicidal thoughts. Some women may feel that they are not interested in any of their daily activities anymore, in things that were meaningful in their lives, things that they used to enjoy before. As a result of the violence that they experience, they may lose interest in the things that they used to enjoy. This could also be their family members as well, where they don't pay attention to the home, they don't pay attention to the children, because they have lost interest and sometimes even the will to live. And this may also lead to less of productivity and absenteeism at work as well, where someone does not even feel like waking up in the morning, and as a result, not going to work. And it may lead to someone losing their job as well. So there's a sense of avoidance, not wanting to see other people, not wanting to interact with other people. So detaching yourself from things that you used to be interested in. Some may feel a sense of foreshortened future, where there's no point in thinking about the future because what's happening to me today has led to me to not be interested in anything else in my life. So as a result, they can't plan ahead because of this uncertainty of their lived reality. And then fifth, one of the psychological impacts is also anger outbursts and difficulty concentrating, which is also linked to the idea of depression and suicidal. It can affect productivity and affect one's relationship with other people. It can also lead to the disintegration of families, right? So when children do not feel that they are cared for, where there is no good relationship between the partners within the home, this may affect the family itself, and it may lead to the disintegration of the family. So women in our communities are constantly working the intimate spaces, the relational, working together with one another, and also the structural, our engagement with the legal system, our engagement with the government. All of these happen at the same time. So they don't happen in isolation, where the intimate, the relational, the structural happen independently, but they're all intertwined. So their reimagining of the daily realities that confront them continuously shift with the destabilizing conditions. And at the moment, the country has been destabilized by COVID-19, as we know. And this has influenced how interactions also happen within the home as well, within the intimate spaces. This requires then women to constantly think of survival strategies in the places that they occupy. So what can be done about this? What are the implications of this? Many women end up creating networks of care where they can support each other. So what are some of the ways in which women can overcome these negative psychological burdens that they carry as a result of gender-based violence? And here I would like to mention a few. The spirit of togetherness, right? And solidarity and cooperation within our communities. It's important for us within our communities to create the webs of connection where there is solidarity amongst us, where women can feel that they can support one another as women, and where they do not feel judged. We need to create spaces where women feel safe and not alienated, where it is okay to speak about being violated without feeling shame or without feeling judged. This may involve drawing from our own cultural and traditional resources that assist in nurturing human connections. This would be over and above psychological counseling that some women even struggle to access. While psychological counseling is one of the resources that are there in place, but we know that there is insufficient number of psychologists that are available for the number of women or the number of people who need psychological services within the country. So it's therefore important that we create these networks and solidarities and cooperations within our communities to make sure that women are supported. There's also a requirement for spaces where women are understood and their humanity acknowledged. Treating women with dignity will assist in them not feeling helpless and alone. And also it will assist in breaking the silences that we have in many of our communities. Women need to be empowered by being allowed to participate actively in decision-making processes. And this is within and outside their homes, especially decisions affecting their lives, such as what interventions would be appropriate for them. And here I'm in agreement with Dr. Foster in the talk that she just gave, in what she calls the importance of moving from protectionist approach to acknowledging women's agency. So acknowledging that women are thinking beings, acknowledging that women have knowledge about their lives and their experiences, and therefore give them space to exercise the agency that they have. And then again, as was already mentioned by Ms. Mavuso in the beginning and also reiterated by Dr. Foster, creating income generating activities, such as farming, for example, or creative art forms, which can be therapeutic, but also serve as a source of income. Self-sufficiency and a sense of independence contributes towards people feeling in control of their lives. And the legal redress is also very necessary for healing to happen. The legal system has to ensure that perpetrators are punished accordingly, as failure to do so leads to secondary trauma, and it puts women at the risk of further violence as well. So justice assists with the process of healing. So it's important for us to think about that. And one of the ways in which secondary trauma happens is when women report gender-based violence at many of our police stations and the ways in which they get treated when they get to these police stations. So it's therefore important that we think about sensitivity training in many of our service providing spaces such as police stations. And for women who have been violated, who have experienced gender-based violence, it's important for us as women to move from seeing ourselves as victims to seeing ourselves as survivors, because the language also is very important. The language that we use is very important. It is empowering to see yourself in a positive and not negative light, releasing the internal pain, acknowledging that you are feeling the pain, crying and verbalizing the feeling and emotions that are being felt is also a step towards healing. It's also a step towards taking charge of your life as well. And then another important thing I would like to mention is forgiveness. Forgiving the person who has wronged you, it lifts the weight from you and allows you to not be resentful, as being resentful can weigh heavily on you. So we need to nurture ourselves, we need to be kind to ourselves as women, and we need to allow ourselves to heal, because healing is a process. It's not an event. It's something that happens over time. This allows us to take our power back, and it also speaks to not only the psychological, but the physical as well. As we take care of our psychological well-being, we also need to take care of our physical well-being as well, because physical wellness is intricately linked to psychological wellness. And as I move towards closing, I also want to reiterate that funding women's full participation in civil society is very critical. Women who are active in civil society can be highly effective in influencing global, regional, and national cooperations as well. And more money needs to flow towards supporting women's active participation in civil society. And this is my challenge to the government as well. Women in communities should be empowered. While government assistance is crucial and needed, it is not sufficient. We should not only rely on the government. It is critical to tap into resources and knowledges that are within our communities. And more resources should be given to women collectives who can cater for women with psychological wounds. So in the midst of despair, in the midst of desperation, in the midst of uncertainty, there continues to be glimpses of hope. And I would like to challenge us to look towards that hope. The work done by activists and everyday women in their homes and communities offer radical possibilities on how we can imagine confronting the crisis of gendered violence. I would like to conclude by highlighting that it is important for communities to pull together, in particular women in communities, to assist one another and hold space for each other. And with these few words, I would like to pause here. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I give back to you, facilitator, and to the next speaker.
Mrs. Botha, are you there? Sorry, Mrs. Botha, can you hear me?
Perhaps we can move to the next speaker.
Sorry, maybe we can just hand over to the next speaker, please.
Ntombazana, you're muted. You are muted, Ntombazana.
Unmute. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Sorry, Ms. Botha, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
An echo.
Yes, there is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there's still an echo.
Can I ask the next?
Are you using two devices simultaneously? You might be using two devices at the same time.
Let me just exit this one. Hello?
Hello, yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. You may continue, Mrs. Berta.
Thank you. Can we have the next speaker, please? It will be Professor Tlengiwe Mkhize, Deputy Minister of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am certainly not the Deputy Minister. I am Nsigi from the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. Is it indeed my turn? I know.
Sorry, we're losing you.
Still in order. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Better?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying, I see I'm still frozen. I was just saying that I'm hoping that the message did reach you that the Deputy Minister is held up on parliamentary matters and that I would be speaking on behalf of the department.
Yes, it is not a problem. You may continue.
All right, great. Thank you. And the topic that we've been given, and I think I need to stay standing, the topic that we were given is to talk about government and women's empowerment, which is quite broad, and at the same time, one would find and want to argue that the information may be quite limited. And I want to argue that it depends from which perspective you are all coming from and how far back. Oftentimes, the whole issue of 26 years of democracy comes into play as if it were a raising of a child type of calculation, when it's actually about raising or building of a nation which actually had inherited a disparity, a great discrepancy between men and women. Where women have always been on the back burner from the point at which we were minors to husbands, if you chose to get married, and your surname changed automatically whether you wanted it or not, to the opportunity to vote. And so the various struggles that have been fought to bring us to democracy have, in large part, been not necessarily an empowerment of women, but the women fighting for their own emancipation being freedom from the laws, the social, the political, and the economic barriers that were the main feature of an apartheid South Africa. We, however, at the economic front have not made as much strides as we would like in the country. However, if we listen to the president during Women's Month, on Women's Day, the argument was, why 40% and not 50% when South African women make up more of the population? Why must South African women only be afforded 40% of government spend? But if you ask how much was allocated to women previously, you'd find that there was very little, if anything at all. So there was never a pronouncement. And there was also indication around the medium-term strategic framework as it pertains to gender-based violence. But similarly, what the president was talking about was a directive which is in the medium-term strategic framework of government departments to say in the next 12 months, every single government department in every sphere of government should be able to indicate how much of their procurement budget they have spent on women-owned enterprises. So that is an empowerment initiative to say you are given a directive to actually make sure that women are receiving at least a minimum of 40%. Gauteng had been a good example of actually tracking that data about 2 years ago. Not sure if they're still doing it, but the beauty of having civil society and an active citizenry and the recognition. And I love the narrative that keeps coming over and over and over again. Just about every speaker has said, government cannot do it alone. It also is incumbent upon us as a citizenry, it's incumbent upon society as a whole, to make sure that we are actually actively participating in ensuring that the empowerment of women in particular actually happens, right? And part of that is civil society being able to say, these are public funds. You have had the first quarter of procurement. How many people have procured from the Department of Infrastructure and Development? And of those who have procured, how many of those were women? Of those who were women, how much money actually went to them, right? In Gauteng, when they did finally track, they found that the Department of Infrastructure and Development had only allocated 1% of the entire budget, which was in the billions. Only 1% of that had actually been not given, but was procurement for women. That was what was, it wasn't even earmarked, that the women who tendered were able to then get the opportunity, and it was only 1%. So when the President talks about 40%, it is literally a jump to every single public servant within the value chain to ensure that with procurement funding, which is in the trillions already, that actually 40% is a leap, but it's still not enough. Other empowerment initiatives that have been talked about or that have actually been seen is around, and of course part of why government does work with multinationals and has multilateral relations, like the UNDP, like UN Women, UNFPA, and the AU and others, is to leverage the research ability, the capabilities that they have, and the technical support that they can give to government, amongst which is to indicate that while South Africa is doing fairly well and relatively well, not in gender-based violence and femicide, which is not doing great at all, on that front, but in terms of the empowerment of women, including representation. Now that we have women who are being represented, or women representation, whether in the political sphere or the social sphere, we tend to then say it's just representation, but that is actually somebody being employed who is actually economically empowered because they have the job, because we also know that unemployment is higher amongst women. But it does require a citizenry that continuously holds government to account, as in Pillar 1 of the NSP on GBV. It is not accounting only on GBV, but you have to be accountable on the spend, the money spent on the empowerment of women. And I agree fully with Dr. Foster that economic empowerment or being economically independent is not in itself a determinant of women being able to actually leave violent relationships or violent situations, including environments in the workplace that actually have bullying, whether it's by men or women, or whether it's sexual harassment in the workplace. It really is not an indicator that people can. However, in order for women to no longer be the face of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, it does require us to really relook at the definition of gender, which is unlikely to change, and how we choose to participate or not participate in the perpetuation of how gender is defined. You look at the WHO and how they define gender around what the roles, responsibilities, but also opportunities that are afforded to men, women, girls, and boys. And once you talk about opportunities, it means there are certain jobs that women can do and others that they cannot, because the social construct of gender is around roles, responsibilities, and opportunities as one of the terms that they have as part of their definition, which is exactly what brings about inequality globally, but also obviously in poorer countries it becomes exacerbated. So in terms of government efforts, not everybody would stand up in applause, but the efforts have been more than representation. Yes, government has faltered where they would replace women with males in terms of positions that they replace or employ somebody else. At the top echelons of government, which is the Director General's level, where you are literally, I think we have 2 permanent Director Generals in government, if not 3 females, at the very minimum, out of about 36. So if you then take that further afield and you look at how many ambassadors or consul generals we have in the country who represent South Africa abroad, out of 120 odd missions, we hardly have 30. So those efforts, sometimes we look domestically and don't look internationally at our footprint, and that's why I bring in the multinationals, but also the region. That a lot of South Africans, there are opportunities within the SADC region that can actually work towards the empowerment of women, but find that, and we get a lot of this through the United Nations and through SADC, that South Africans actually do not apply for the positions that are available in those instances. So the government has not done enough, and that is undisputed, but really does need an active citizenry, one, to hold it to account, but also to push it to the point of political will, as would have been the case in gender-based violence, but also not to ghettoize the issues of the empowerment of women only to gender-based violence, but to look at women holistically, that we are social, we are economic, and we have to function within society across the spheres and within the length and breadth of the country and abroad where opportunities do arise. I would then perhaps like to end it there, and maybe as a concluding point is, there would not be a Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disability, and then Department of Women and the Department of Women, Children, and Persons with Disability if people were actually making the effort. Just like there would be no road rules of the road if everybody adhered to whatever speed limit was there. So if people do not adhere to actually empowering women deliberately without being accused of being corrupt, because you have motivated for the appointment of a woman instead of a man, because the woman was simply capable, they actually would want to find a reason why that woman should not be the one being appointed. So it's because society, private, public, civil society, and government as a whole are not actually making concerted, consistent effort in ensuring that there is empowerment of women that is sustainable, so that not only do they get a catering tender today and then all for 3 years, and then they should be fulfilled. And that is not the point. The point is to continuously build on the gains and defend the other gains and make sure that we can advance the cause of the overall empowerment of women.
Hello.
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Mrs. Berta, we can hear you.
Ntombazana, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that we've virtually got about 15 minutes or so to have comments raised or questions to the speakers. I am going to thank you very much to all the speakers and the presenters. And we can now go on to the discussions. Can I get any comments, questions, clarifications at this point, please?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
This is David Musoma from the CRL Commission.
Yes, sir.
We work together with the Moral Regeneration. And I want to really appreciate the inputs and the topic as well. A restatement of the role of women as the pillars of society. What I heard today is really reinforcement of the situation that our women are confronted with in our South African environment. Part of my expectation was for the speakers to tell us how do we get out of this morass? How do we get out of this situation? Because women are the givers of life. Men are brought up by women. But as they grow, they become the ones that inflict pain, even death, to those who nurtured them and gave them life. So it's a vicious cycle. I think what confronts us today, what are the strategies we can together embark on to solve this problem? I know it's not a one-time problem, it's not an event. It's a very deep-seated societal problem, which is born out of patriarchy. And I think that would be, for me, a sense of my entry point into our conversation in terms of practical ways of doing this, of solving the problem, or even ameliorating it, so to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Do we
Hello?
have another? Yes.
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Zodwa Nkosi. I'm from Mpumalanga Moral Regeneration Movement, Women Desk. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Father Smangaliso Mkhatshwa, to thank all the presenters, to thank all the participants, including you, Ntombizodwa Botha, our program director. I just want to comment on the presentation given by Dr. Leslie N. Dr. Leslie spoke about 50% women and children who are killed by their so-called partners, which is true. It happens almost every day in South Africa, especially now. For the first time in 26 years, having women and children, including people with disabilities, are killed like this. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. All right.
Yes.
Another thing she spoke about, declaration of emergency, that we kept on marching, we kept on singing, we kept on doing all this and that, but it seems as if our government doesn't hear us, which is true. Our government don't hear us as women and children in South Africa. Here in Mpumalanga, we've got a lady who was brutally murdered by her husband. Her name is Tebogo Mabunda. Tebogo Mabunda was shot 10 times by her so-called husband. But up until now, nothing has been done. We had a case at Masoi whereby a guy killed 3 women and buried them. Up until today, nothing has been done. So really, it seems as if our justice is failing us as women. Dr. Leslie spoke about 1 billion that it's been set aside. I don't know or if it's been set aside by government to assist women or what. I really don't know on that. Then I just want to thank our psychologist, Sispuleng Sekhalo. Sispuleng, you really spoke fruitfully about our women in South Africa. We are victimized by our so-called loved ones. In South Africa, we've got this thing called ukutwala, whereby a young girl is taken and given to an old man to be his wife, which is not a good thing. This thing has been happening for many years, but nothing has been done. Our government kept on talking and talking. And we are sick and tired now of this talking with no implementation, especially the past 2 years. Women are being killed and nothing has been done. We also have this thing called virginity testing. The virginity testing has been done for many years, and we've been complaining about that. Nothing has been done. We also have the genitally mutilation, but it seems as if we are talking and talking, and we are going to talk, I don't know until when. Then another thing, the Department of Women, Children, People with Disability, I thought they are going to give us a progress report. How far are they with the cases of women, children, people with disability are they? But it seems as if they are also having a problem like us, normally people. So really, we are pulling very hard in South Africa, especially us in the rural areas of Mpumalanga. We really don't know what to do. And we just want to ask the government that, are we really going to win the battle against GBV? Because we are talking and talking, but no implementation. So lastly, as Mpumalanga Moral Regeneration Movement Women Desk, we are prepared to establish a Mpumalanga Council Against Gender-Based Violence in order to provide strategic guidance and to monitor the implementation of all programs dealing with the elimination of gender-based violence in the country, even in the province. It is further envisaged that this will be a forceful, authoritative structure capable and adopted comprehensive measures in addressing all forms of violence against gender-based violence. Especially, we've got people living with albinism here in Mpumalanga, and people believe that if you kill those people, you will be rich, which is not a good thing. It's a wrong idea. So really, we need our government to implement those things, or to really help us in achieving gender-based violence. And also, we ask our president, because most of the time he will talk and talk, but no implementation. So I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Zodo. Let's be a bit considerate about time, because other people would like to also comment or raise questions. Thank you. Can we have the next?
Can we please get Prophet Zodwa to speak, whose hand is up?
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Thanks again for receiving me here. It's Prophetess Zodwa Mkhonza from Mpumalanga Moral Generation Movement. I'm an executive committee member of the structure. I reside at Emalahleni. I'm serving as a treasurer. And I'm also the Moral Generation ambassador in my region, which is in Kangala. Thank you again. Because of time, I'm gonna just pick up something that Sis Puleng spoke about, the emotional abuse of women, especially in their relationships. But now I'm gonna take this on the religious side of it. Of course, I'm a pastor. I think the issue of women being abused emotionally begins from our homes, where we grow up as girls. Everyone in the family, our mothers, our fathers, have suppressed us to a point where we grow up accepting and admitting that Tina Vele, we are inferior to boys. Then that is a slavery in a way, though we can't see it. So when you go to the crashes and to the churches, already that thing is in us. It's planted as early as when we grow up as children. And then the church also, I'm happy that I'm working hand in hand with Father Smangali Somkajo. We speak, he's my father, we speak now and again. And Dr. Antali, I always raise this issue, especially with the father, that the church also has got a lot of damage that it has done. Every church, I'm born again, but I'm saying every church. I've seen this, I've been observing. That in the churches also, women are suppressed. And then that thing of losing your self-esteem and you becoming you can't be self-confident, because even if you have got a certain calling, the church also generalize everything that no, because you're a woman, you can't do 1, 2, 3. And then because you're the men, you can do 1, 2, 3. And then that's why the churches are having problems, because women are not allowed to fulfill their callings and to use the potential of teaching in the churches. Look how much corruption is happening in the churches. Look how much rape cases are happening in the churches. The worship team can be raped by the pastor, and then you are unfortunate if it's going to be exposed. But even those cases which have not been exposed or not been disclosed, but there are cases. So men have been taught from home as they grow up, especially us Black people, as Africans. South Africa specifically because I'm a South African, that men can bull us around, they can do everything. When you get to church, it's the same thing. You run to work, we try to study, and then we try to qualify, but the suppression, the slavery was done when we opened our eyes. From the age of 4 years, you know that the boy is superior to a woman. And the Bible said God created them both, male and female. So the church also has got a lot of work to do. As religious leaders, we have got a lot of work to do to enhance those positive values to the churches. That's what I'm doing in Witbank. Before going out there, because we're preaching to people whom we cannot even practice justice to. So it's not only that maybe it happens outside the church, it's in the church, at the church, and then it starts at home. If we as parents, I don't know, somebody spoke earlier on because I was struggling to log in and out, the network is bad here. But somebody spoke about, if only women could be, this woman, I don't know, dialogues could be there every month. I don't think this father there and everyone should be once off in like August month. I think this thing now has come to the point where we're saying, we try and people are being arrested, some are being released and left and right, whatnot, but the problem is growing. The problem is, it's exceedingly, I don't know how to control it, but if this damage can be controlled from home, let us start from home, so that when you go out to creches and Sunday schools, we know already we're equipped. Our female children, our girls should be taught that also women too. It's not about 50-50, but they also have the equal rights, especially if you speak about human rights, like boys. And then we bring up our children like that. At Ezunkulis, at crashes, we teach that. Sunday schools, we stop the church if it has to stop. Just let our children be taught the right thing before we can go on, because otherwise this problem is going to go on. We're going to talk the whole month of August, and then September we back to the square one. We see tears, we see everything. So let this thing begin at home. And if you can stand up as a society, I'm promising you this, there will be a huge improvement. But if we're speaking and then we speak on August, we'll see it next year, August. Doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much. We don't have much time. We eating into Father Mkachwa's time. Father Mkachwa, can you please bear with us? We need responses from the speakers, please. Is there any speaker who would like to respond?
I'll go first. I think, some valid points have been made, but we must not throw aside the fact that we've made big strides. Particularly 2019, 2020, we've had for the first time political commitment from the presidents. Never happened in the history of the country before. We can't, kind of invisibilize that. We've had that commitment. Secondly, we've got a declaration on violence against women. That's a big thing. We've had a presidential committee. We've come up with a national strategic plan. We have identified the problems that there are in our society, as I said in the presentation, and we now are going to work multisectorally and with across disciplines, across partners to address this. So I think there should be a sense of hope. There should be a sense of hope in what Mr. Mavuso spoke about, the energy and the creativity of the young people. We see that they're turning. They were the ones that took to the streets and led us in the total shutdown campaign. There are protests. There are a number of initiatives that are addressing these issues. And I think what we've got to do in August in particular is acknowledge it and embrace it and affirm it, that we are not standing still as women or as a society, and we are moving forward on this. Do we have challenges? Absolutely. Do we have a long way to go? Yes, we have. But we've got something different. We've got a roadmap. we've got a framework, we have political will. So I think that for August month, we must also celebrate the fact that so many women, all of you that are on this platform now, are laying your lives down to make a difference in other people's lives. Through your church committees, through the moral regeneration movement, through various other institutions, everybody in this conversation now is doing something to make a contribution to addressing the problem. I would actually like to acknowledge and thank everybody on this platform for saying you are making a difference. And this changing the trajectory of what's happening in our country is not an event. It's a process. And every step along the way where we have achievement, let's celebrate that. August month is a celebration of saying we are women, we are proud, we are strong, we are courageous, we are wise, and we have energy that we're putting into changing our country around. Because if we address violence against women, we are working towards creating a better country for everybody. And so I want people to really feel positive about what's happening, you know, be aware of what's happening and make your contribution by taking on one of the 6 pillars and saying, I'm going to work on the pillar of prevention or response and care or inputting into policy. Because now we have something to do and report against that, show that we have to breathe life into the National Strategic Plan. We can't sit and wait for government to do it. It's not government responsibility alone, it's our responsibility as a society, as civil society, as religious sector and so forth. So take that, you know, into your heart and work with that. And really thank you to everybody who's here today for what your input has been and what you continue to do at community level, at family level, and at societal level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. Is there anybody else from the presenters would like to?
Yes, my hand is up. It's in Ziki. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief because I just want to support what Dr. Leslie Ann has just indicated, that we cannot despair, nor can we just point fingers. And I would like us to really desist from the notion that nothing has happened. You know, we perpetuate such a negative narrative about the work that we are actually doing in our own homes, in government, in civil society, in the churches, and actually a statement that says government has done absolutely nothing when there's been 2 years of complete commitment and allocation or redirection of funding towards an issue that's been critical. Also, 1913 was when the Land Act came into effect. We're still talking about land today. We cannot tire about talking about the issues that actually affect us, because in our silence, we will condone the ongoing violence, we will condone the lack of activity, the lack of implementation of all the work that's been done. In our silence and in our pointing at government, we will desist from doing what we.
Sorry, we just lost you.
Oh, no. I was finished. I just said thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Oh, thank you very much. We're eating into Father Mkachwa's time.
I see Tabisa's hand is up. Can you please get her to speak?
Pardon?
Tabisa's hand is up.
Oh,
hello.
Okay.
Hello.
I can't see hands. Yes.
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay. I just thank you. Firstly, thank you so much to the speakers. They are so brilliant. I just have a question. How does a woman deal with being told that you must attend something, let's say a meeting, for example, because you're a woman, just to show that there's a woman there. How does one deal with that? How does one respond to that? That's the question that I have.
Okay, is there anybody to respond to that? Presenters? Somebody's hand is up.
Please, can we get Galaxy J1 to speak? I just want to remind everyone before we continue that this dialogue is mainly women-driven, and hence why Father Mkachwa is not speaking. He has waived his right to speak, but he will be speaking in subsequent dialogues. Just for this one, it's mainly women-based. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
Galaxy J1 can continue.
Hello?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Shanika.
Can you raise your voice?
I just want to add.
Can you raise your voice, please? Can you raise your voice?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shanika.
We've lost you. Hello?
I just want to add a few before we close. I've been listening and we've got great speakers, and thank you so much for all the information. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes. Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Can I just suggest that we move on to Prophet Zadwa until we manage to get Galaxy J1's mic back?
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you continue, please? We've lost you again.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay.
Galaxy J1, you can continue.
All right. I think
Sorry, I think there's a problem with your network. Mrs. Gota, maybe if we can just close because we are out of time.
We're out of time. But there was a proposal. I can't remember how it was formulated, but it sounded like we needed to collaborate with other or find partners. I'm thinking of, can everybody hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm thinking of something like you remember the women's movement, something like a movement that will attend to all these issues that were raised, especially the issues raised by by Professor Sikhalo. Advisory and in advisory capacity, in monitoring, evaluation, and also for the department to again look at the act itself, which is the promotion of equality and prevention of unfair discrimination. Section 8, which deals with this unfair discrimination on grounds of gender, and ensure that the justice system also implements what is contained in that and in that act as amended. That's one of the things. So each component will have a responsibility, whether it's for monitoring or what in an advisory capacity within that same collective. That's how it sounds to me. So that we are very sure that we make progress, especially at this time when there is political will. May I pause? If there's no other person.
I have a question.
Yes.
And my question is, what is your strategic, I suppose I can call it plan, or what is your plan of action in respect of gender-based violence? What would you be monitoring? Can you share that? Can MRM share that plan with us? Have they developed one?
I think some of the things were raised, which means, but some of the people who raised their concerns were saying that in some areas there's no implementation. Now, monitoring what is happening, say for example, if we were to carry out what Dr. Foster was telling us, we would then monitor if it's happening in the various sectors. That is one of the things we would, in that collective, work with partners like the Gender Commission, like the CRL, and government and other NGOs. So we would do what we normally do, but report to the collective.
Thank you, Mambota. I think just a few words from me. I think I would like to agree with you, Dr. Leslie, and my understanding of what Mambota is talking about is that based on some of the issues that were raised in today's webinar, we should think about a way forward and how we can concretize some of the issues that were raised. Because often we have webinars, we have talks, we have presentations, and then it ends there. So I think what's important is how do we then move forward to make sure that this is not a once-off thing in terms of what we're talking about, and also not just to plan the next webinar, but to actually think about practical things that can be put in place. For example, one of the comments that were made by someone here was the issue of a woman who was murdered last year. And so a year later, they're still waiting for the DNA results. And obviously without evidence or DNA results, you know that means the the punishment that is linked to the crime that was committed would be delayed because of all the evidence that is needed. And I think my understanding is that if we're thinking about putting actions in or putting a plan of action in place in terms of monitoring and evaluation, this would be one of the examples of some of the things that could be done to hold the justice system accountable in terms of ensuring that the system moves swiftly when it comes to the violations that are there perpetrated against women, so that a person does not have to wait for a year for DNA results to come. They don't have to wait for 3 years for DNA results to come. And so if we take action and working together as different entities or different organizations in different places within the country, and perhaps the moral regeneration movement as one of the leaders in this and working with other organizations, these are some of the things that could be done in ensuring that there are steps that are taken, because people end up losing faith in the system, people end up not reporting, people end up feeling helpless if they do not see the results of the actions that are taken. If I go and report something and then nothing is done, then what are the chances that I will go and report next time when something else happens? And so I think our role is to not talk about these things and highlight these challenges, but think practically about ways in which we can actively play a role in holding ourselves as civil society accountable, but also holding the government and the justice system in particular accountable. And I would be in support of that.
Thank you. And one of the things that we can add, sorry, Leslie Ann, one of the things we could add is a toll-free number. When things don't go right with the community, even with the issues raised by Professor Schalo, the trauma, the self-esteem, low self-esteem, helplessness, depression, and all, those also can be reported by using a toll-free number by the collective. Thank you, Leslie Ann.
I'm in agreement with what everyone's saying, but what I'm trying to really drive home is the fact that we have to sit down and craft the actual strategy that we're going to use, because the problem with the work we've done is it's touching here, touching there, touching everywhere, and actually nowhere. But moral regeneration can say of the 6 pillars, we're going to do 2 or we're going to do 3. Accountability and leadership is a good one because you are rooted at both provincial, district, and local level. So being able to drive the accountability and leadership pillar, as Professor Schalo was saying, would be a good point, would be a good issue to pick up. I just want to say, be clear about what the 2 or 3 or 4 things are that you're going to do. Focus on that and roll that out countrywide. That would be effective. And that could be, I mean, you're talking, and this is completely aligned with the idea around monitoring. So you're going to say, well, we're going to monitor cases that don't go to court or where the investigation is not. So you have a full fleshed out strategy to deal with that particular issue. Some of your partners are going to want to deal with prevention campaigns, and some of them with healing. So you might want to do all 3 of those, although not all partners want to do all 3 of them. So some of you would have greater capacity in one area and more capacity in another. It's just for me to say, what I'm trying to say is just be clear about what the particular things you are going to be, because it would have greater impact and greater effect. And for that, you need another conversation, maybe not on Zoom, but you need a conversation where you say, today we are going to decide as a collective that these are the 3 things. And some people in the questions and the inputs have actually said things like that. So I think that for me, it's just packaging it in a way that everybody can understand and accept, and you have consensus around it. These are the 3 things we're going to do, and in each area, you map out a set of activities that you're going to do, because then you need the capacity, you need the support for those things to become, to breathe life into them. So that's what I'm thinking. It's no different from what you're saying. I'm just saying the approach we use must be strategic. It must be clear, must be doable. And then you can have a short-term, medium-term, long-term goal. The plan is supposed to run on a 5-year basis. What can you achieve in those 5 years? So it might be that you get more cases into court. Most cases fall by the wayside before they even get into court. So dockets get missing, or, the police are bought over in certain places. Then you need little committees in those areas, because you have to root this at the local level. You can't run it from some faraway distance. Every community where you have a moral regeneration presence must be able to address certain aspects of that. And they can choose which ones they want to do. For me, that would be the most effective. Because if you force it onto them and it's not something that they really see as a priority, they won't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The other issue is the economic issue. If government has been allocated, government departments have been allocated some funds specifically for GBV victims, we need to know what they have done. They need also to report to the collective on the monies that they've received, I think. So can we leave this to the MRM to put together and then convene another meeting so that they are the ones that would support the collective? If we agree on a collective and look at all the issues that have been raised, and also they would be able to work out what the way forward is from what our inputs, all our inputs have been. Thank you very much, everybody. Hello?
Just on behalf of the MRM, one point is that we have an anti-femicide campaign, which was launched in Regina Mundi, which is an ongoing campaign that is still active in 2020. And the second thing is that as a result of time constraints, we will have to unfortunately close the meeting. But we would love to have more dialogues like this in the future. So maybe if we can just end it, we can just have our closing statements now. And yes, and then we can end it. Thank you.
It's over to Father Mukatra.
Father Mukatra will not be speaking because it's a woman's dialogue.
I thought it was on the program. Can I just say thank you very much to the presenters and also to the other participants who raised questions and had comments, particularly to CRL and all the MRM activists that raised questions and comments, and also provided us with some way forward, something to think about. And thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you to the operators as well. Can we call this meeting to a close?